Hare Krishna. So, thank you very much for joining us on this GBC SPT live conversation on devotee care called Vaishnav Seva, a weekly dialogue conversation with different leaders across ISKCON to inspire and embed a culture of devotee care within ISKCON temples and communities. On behalf of the Global Devotee Care Directorate, we are very honored to have with us His Holiness Devamrita Swami Maharaj this afternoon with us. Welcome, Maharaj, for this Facebook Live conversation. And today's conversation is specifically about devotee care for leaders. So, you know, rather than give a formal intro, apart from the fact that Maharaj is a member of the GBC and definitely he is, one of the very, very prominent authors within ISKCON, having published several books, including from the BBT. As part of a introduction come question that Maharaj, you're a graduate from Yale University, and Yale University is very famous for having produced many leaders. So, do you think that being a graduate from Yale University gave you an advantage in your leadership role within ISKCON? And what would you comment about others who may not be similarly privileged?
This is a complex question. It takes me back to my last month at Yale when I expressed to my dean of studies that I didn't see much place for myself in materialistic society. He just looked at me without blinking and said, "You are a Yale man. You will influence the world." Now, let's try to understand how that institution prepares its leaders. Looking back now, I can see they have their own version of devotee care or student care. Before getting to that, though, I want to point out that that was my karma, my attending that university. And I have to be careful that pride, false ego, does not taint my endeavors in bhakti, because I have many God brothers who didn't have the background I have, yet I hold their feet on high. They're such exalted souls. So I'm duty bound to use whatever I have in my background in Krishna's service. Prabhupada's formula was whatever you bring to the table when you come to bhakti, you utilize that. So we all have different paths. And the point is, how much are we dedicated to pure devotional service? Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. For those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the intelligence. So that is my conclusion. The best education, the best university is in that verse. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. That's extremely hope giving. And you have brought the spiritual and transcendental context so powerfully forward. Now, in the 70s, you were very deeply engaged in printing, publishing, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books in various adventurous ways. And you have interacted with Srila Prabhupada and have seen Srila Prabhupada interacting with his leaders. And you were also, serving under many of those leaders. So this is a question which we are asking all the leaders, that amongst all the various qualities of Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, which are some of those qualities, especially with respect to Srila Prabhupada's care for his leaders, which you personally saw or heard, or maybe you saw the impact of that in your personal lives during those 70s period when Srila Prabhupada was still around?
Two things come to my mind. Number one is he rarely chastised his big leaders in public. You had to hear about it through the back door that so and so was chastised sternly. Prabhupada understood that to be a leader means you're sacrificing for his service, you're putting yourself on the line. And so when a mistake was made, he often, I would say generally, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj verifies this, he would do it behind closed doors. He would certainly do it, though. Number two, I observed in Prabhupada such gratitude for anyone who tried to help his mission to his spiritual master. He was so grateful, and he would express that. Just like at the BBT when he gave us the impossible instruction to print all those books in 2 months. And then upon the completion of such an impossible task, and to this day, I don't understand materially how it was accomplished. When it was completed, he expressed such gratitude. He wrote a letter saying, by this particular endeavor, you will all go back to Godhead. So he was very firm, yet grateful for anyone who assisted his efforts to please his Guru Maharaj. And I would say that gratitude and appreciation is such an important part of devotee care.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much for sharing these, two gems, because many times when, as leaders, we are disturbed and we are provoked, then sometimes even in public, this kind of a chastisement may happen. And I think the point you made about Srila Prabhupada is so powerful. So my next question is that leaders are very busy executing projects, leading teams, doing things. In fact, even the onus and the responsibility of caring for others rests on the leaders. So then when we discuss this topic, care for leaders, so maybe sometimes some leaders may get a little bewildered or even wonder that, well, I am the person caring for everybody. From where will you generate someone who will care for me? Because I don't see that. So in your opinion, how do we go about this task of even making a compelling case that leaders also need care, and how do we make this case strong both for the leaders to understand and for the devotees who are following the leaders to understand that your leader needs care, and for the leader to understand that he needs the care? So, that's my question.
In answering that question, should I give some case histories without mentioning names or places?
Yes, Mara, sure. Please go ahead.
I've served on every habitable continent of the world. That means everywhere except Antarctica. So I've seen my share of talented and skilled, even brilliant leaders who, as you said, somehow or other felt that they were above caring for themselves, or even above others asking them, please care for yourself. Without telling you names and places, of course, and bear in mind, I've been all over the world. One leader was becoming a bit infamous for not chanting his rounds. This was a common problem back in the early days because devotees, the leaders were so busy. Everything was booming. And so it was very easy. Looking back, I can see it was very easy for a leader to just get absorbed in the booming missionary activities of the Krishna Conscious Society and neglect his, and back then it was simply his, spiritual development in the name of sacrificing for Mahaprabhu. So there was this one wonderful leader who had done so much for Prabhupada, but he stopped chanting his rounds, and everyone in the community knew about it, and they were buzzing about it. So here I am, a young devotee compared to his stature. I decided, what's the use in all this buzz? I'm going to go see him privately. So I did that. And I said, everyone is saying, Maharaj, everyone is saying you're not chanting your rounds. So he looked at me and said, you know, I like you. You come and talk to me straightforwardly. I know everyone's talking behind my back. I like you because you're coming to me straight. And he said, to tell you the truth, Prabhupada said I didn't have to chant my rounds. I was, that was a knockout punch for me. So I went back and told some other senior devotees. They knew I had gone to see this leader, and so they were waiting to hear the results. And I just told these other senior devotees, he agrees, he doesn't chant his rounds. Immediately, they went and stormed into his office. Aha! You have admitted. Devamrita Das Brahmachari has told us you have admitted you're not chanting. He just looked at them calmly and said, I never said that. I don't know why Devamrita has said such a thing. I've never said that. So then they came back storming at me. Oh, you made this all up. You made this all up. Oh. Another case in another part of the world. And I'm giving these examples not to stir things up, but just to give you firsthand graphic accounts of lessons that we all should learn from, especially me. I said to a leader who I knew we knew each other since our beginning days, at least my beginning days. He was a few years earlier than me. And I said, all right, this is back in the Zonal Acharya days. I said, you're not happy. You're not like the way you used to be when you would just travel everywhere, preach, inspire devotees, encourage your leaders to develop. You're not like that anymore. What happened? You should go back to the way that you started. You were so happy then. Now I can see that things have changed. He turned red, and that was it. And that was the end of me. Some years later, that wonderful devotee fell apart completely. And before he fell apart, although I hadn't spoken to him for years, he sent me a message, an audio soundtrack of his chanting Hare Krishna while crying. And I didn't know what to make of it. I was so afraid. I got decapitated years ago. I don't know what to make of this. Later, I found out a few days after he sent that message, he went into unknown behavior. And so, yes, I've seen leaders living in denial about the need for being cared for. What do you think about that?
Yes, Maharaj. I think, some of your examples and case studies which you have shared is very revealing and very important for us to note. And, we were reading one of your books on the mellows of devotional service, which they arise when we practice the devotional service nicely. So this question is related to that. All of our acharyas and the scriptures, they warn us so much about offenses. And one of the meanings or definitions of offenses or aparadha is radha refers to satisfaction and aparadha refers to diminishing satisfaction. And is it that in leadership roles one is expected to take decisions and one does take decisions, and when those decisions affect people in different ways, and then when people are unhappy and they are not really very sure about why this has happened to me and things like that, so is there some kind of an impact which affects the leader? And is that one of the reasons why it is more and more challenging for devotees who are practicing sadhana bhakti to experience genuine satisfaction and joy even in leadership roles because of the subtle influence of the offenses which affects them and in some way? And if that is the case, then what's the solution? Because the society needs leaders, and the society of devotees is very much looking up to leaders to lead them. So what would be that mantra or the formula to lead, make decisions, and be engaged in a very dynamic way in leading the Krishna consciousness movement, at the same time to not tread on the very dangerous minefield of aparad or offenses?
One main problem is pride, because often a leader has facility to do things, to execute, and that can fill you with a sense of achievement. Uh, and it creeps in very subtly. So, therefore, anyone in a leadership capacity, especially, has to always be begging Krishna, please don't let pride gobble me up. It's something about acting as a leader, whether it's managemental or in a spiritual capacity, in terms of just advising devotees rather than dealing with organization. Of course, we know organizing Mahaprabhu's mission is also spiritual. But there's something about being in the driver's seat that can go to your head. And this is what happened to so many of the great devotees that were in the early days of ISKCON. They've done a service for us because we can learn by their mistakes. And therefore, I feel that somehow or other, Krishna will be merciful upon them, even though they may not be practicing bhakti anymore in this lifetime. But they were the first ones to carry the burden, and we can learn by their example everything not to do. Otherwise, we would have no historical precedents or no, as you call them, case studies whatsoever. The case studies would be us.
Right. Thank you so much, Maharaj. What do you feel are five main areas of caution which a leader, you know, within ISKCON should be careful about? How would you categorize, four or five main areas of caution for leaders?
First of all, I mentioned pride. It's amazing how sneaky the entrance of pride can be. So we've talked about that. But I can elaborate a bit more about the early days when Prabhupada was present with us. The natural tendency, not natural, but natural material tendency, was for someone to think, because I'm associating with Prabhupada, uh, I'm getting direct instruction from him. Therefore, I'm in the winner's circle. I'm in rarefied atmosphere. Some other, I must be something special. Even though Prabhupada himself, I remember once he said in a lecture, if you think that someone is advanced just because they're in close physical proximity to me, then I say the mosquito is the most advanced devotee because the mosquito is so close to me. But what is the business of the mosquito? To bite me. So there is that pride. Of course, Srila Prabhupada is not physically present, but we have leaders of various levels. And when leaders get together, it's possible that a leader can take that in the wrong way. That just see, I'm with the in crowd. I'm with the power boys, the proactive boys, and these days girls, men and women. And so, wow, I've made it. I've made it to the parliament. I've made it to the board. So we always have to beg Mahaprabhu for his mercy. Please let me understand that I am just a tiny servitor. And one really has to, at least I have to beg for that constantly without cessation. And it does become ecstatic after a while when you realize your constitutional position as being just a tiny blade of grass at best. Number two, you asked for the 5 areas of caution. Number 2, isolation. I can talk for a long time about this. It's happened so often in the past, and I still see it happening today. Leaders become isolated by virtue of their service, their stature, and their geographic location. They seal themselves off in their own realm for the necessity of service and focusing on the service. Let's consider like Prabhupada disciples. They're not that many these days. And so if you're in a part of the world, okay, where I am right now, I'm speaking from New Zealand. How many Prabhupada disciples are there now in this country? 3. If I go to Australia, which I can't now because of COVID-19, if I go to Australia, I'll find maybe 5 or 6 more that are active. So that means, besides the association of the wonderful grand disciples of Prabhupada, who let us not in any way minimize them, they are the present and the future. But if I want association with my God brothers, I've got to go out of my way. I can't just become busy in my own lair, in my own cave, and say, hey, what do you want out of me? There's no one around. So that's the way it is. No, I've got to seek out association. That is my duty to the devotees I'm serving. That is my duty to the Krishna Conscious Society. I've got to be proactive about seeking association and avoiding being isolated. Because once you get isolated, you start thinking that everything you think is so divine and important. Therefore, one has to go out of the way to associate with devotees. I could talk longer about isolation, but I want to get to number 3, which is envy. It's amazing about that monster envy. I remember Prabhupada explaining that envy means indirect appreciation because you only envy someone who's better or has something better. You don't envy someone who's worse off. So if that person is actually better and doing better, why be envious? Just directly appreciate. Oh, you have done so nicely. You have done so wonderfully. No doubt it's an austerity for that person to hear that, for that devotee to hear such things, but It's very purifying for yourself to say that. And somehow or other, Krishna in everyone's heart, I see, balances the whole situation out. The devotee who's being appreciated and praised doesn't relish that, but because it's the Krishna conscious thing to do, somehow or other, the dynamics balance. So converting envy to appreciation, direct expression of appreciation, is so important. And you can never make a mistake that way. You can never appreciate too much. Even to your subordinates or younger devotees, appreciate, show gratitude, uh, notice how their future will be better than yours. I remember Prabhupada saying about how he viewed his disciples. He said, I look at them all as little spiritual masters that my Guru Maharaj sent to me for me to train up. Number 4, inattentiveness to the necessary spiritual nourishment due to busy in Krishna's service. It's amazing how this creeps in, because if you're practicing a bit of karma yoga and not full bhakti, you're attached to what you're doing and offering it to Krishna. Whereas full bloom bhakti means whatever Krishna wants, however Krishna wants it. Most of us should not look down at karma yoga. We should look up to it. Yes, I want to offer my skills to Krishna. I'm attached to acting in this way. Let Krishna have all the fruits. But there's a problem if we just become attached to doing our thing for Krishna. So much so that we forget about the spiritual nourishment necessary to carry on. Number 5, an interesting one. I wrote these things down just to make sure I remember them. Not taking sufficient shelter of the Dham. I have seen this with my fellows, my older God brothers. I've seen this. They stop going to Vrindavan. They stop going to Mayapur because they're busy, or they don't like India. And I know from my own experience and the experience of my associates that Prabhupada gave us these temples and the dhams knowing that preaching is austere, very demanding. Managing is very austere and demanding sometimes, and we need to recharge. So I've talked to leaders who neglected sufficient time in the dham, and they told me afterwards, after that some problems came in, I guess I didn't spend enough time in the dham. I've heard that several times. So that's 5.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for really, going deep into this aspect and then coming out with 5 areas of caution. And especially, one would not think about something like spending time in the dham, because typically when one gets busy in the practice of Krishna consciousness and one is taking responsibility and one is not stationed close to any of the dhams, then one may think that, okay, whenever I get an opportunity, whenever I get a time, I'll go there whenever it is suitable. But to really prioritize that and then spend quality time to rejuvenate one's practice of Krishna consciousness, and along with that, the spiritual attentiveness, which is so important, and appreciation, and some of these topics need to be really discussed, really churned and presented to various leaders even before they take up leadership responsibilities, to be more on the proactive side. So that kind of brings me to my next question, that what are the 5 top ways you feel that one can actually demonstrate and share care with devotees, with the leaders? How do we
Oh,
show this care to leaders in a practical way,
hmm.
which they'll actually, appreciate?
First of all, I would say empathy. Uh, Try to understand how the leader is carrying burdens. Sympathize with that. Everyone loves sympathy. I can understand that you're dealing with things, events, and duties and situations coming at you at every moment. I can understand that. Uh, Therefore, I'll be a bit patient. The first is empathy. Number two is patience. I'll be a bit patient in my presenting to you a problem that I'm having or a problem I see in others or an organizational problem. I'll be patient. Number three, respectful disagreement. I can understand why you would think like that and want to do like that, but let me offer another opinion. Let me give some feedback respectfully. Mm, in the example I gave of the leader who wasn't chanting his rounds and admitted it to me, as you remember, he told me, I appreciate you. I like you because you come and tell me straight. Whereas these others, they're just behind my back. I know what's going on. So, respectful disagreement. Number four, something Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter, which always caught my interest. It was kind of reverse thinking. He said, good leadership depends on good followers. If they're not good followers, how could you be a good leader? I said, wow, I would have never thought of that. He was telling these devotees who were writing him, you're talking about this leader, but what about the followers? How can the leader truly lead if the followers are not competent? So we can help leaders by being good servitors, by being good followers. Being a good follower doesn't mean being a mindless robot. It just means understanding how organizations work and how someone has to make decisions and someone has to follow them. When ISKCON started offering management courses years ago, in the first days or the first years of it, I sent quite a few devotees to that course who, and I told this to Anuttama Prabhu, who was starting to give those courses at that time. I said, I've sent devotees who are not going to be presidents or in charge of this or that, but I've sent them to understand what management is like. And when they came back from the course, all these devotees told me the same thing. I'm not criticizing anymore. I'm dropping all my campaigns. Now I can understand what a leader has to go through. So I told Anuttara Prabhu, well done, well done. Problems in several temples were solved just by my sending these non-managers to a management course. What else? Mm. Allowing the leader to have some space periodically. The leader needs some downtime where he can recharge spiritually. If he has a family, he needs to get in touch with his family more. If he's a renunciate, he needs to seek out some associates to hear and chant with. Uh, Let me give you an example. There's one leader I know. He's been in his post for more than 30 years. And he's known for being a wonderful devotee, of course, and a wonderful organizer, manager, rock steady. And he has a policy that he's on call at his large temple, one of the mega temples in ISKCON, I won't tell you where. He's on call from Mangal Arti to 3:30 5 days a week. And then outside of those weekday times, you can't get him. He's at his home, hearing and chanting, taking care of affairs, but in solitude. He's on his email, he's on the phone. But if you bang on his door in his apartment, there's going to be no answer. So he told me how he's got devotees trained up. It took a while, but he's been doing this for 30 years, and now everyone understands this is his downtime. And whatever I think is an emergency practically never is a pressing emergency. It can wait till tomorrow morning. I'll see him at Mangal Arti every morning. He's there without fail. But just when 3:30 p.m. comes around, that's it. And then Saturday, everyone knows he'll go to the full morning program on Saturday, and then the rest of the day he spends with his wife, who's a very extraordinary, powerful servitor. And so you don't bother him Saturday after breakfast, all day Saturday. And then Sunday, he's right there at the morning program again, full morning program, and the Sunday feast. So he keeps that rock steady schedule decade after decade. And everyone's accustomed to it. They all accept it. We fit into that framework with our trying to contact him. And I see it works. He told me at first they didn't accept it years ago. Oh, I've got this emergency. I know it's 5:30 in the evening and you don't deal with business and management at that time, but this has to be, I have to talk now. They got over that. And so he established a rhythm, and the whole community accepts that rhythm because they know when he's on call, he is on call. He's on top of everything. And when he clicks off, he clicks off. And devotees can see he's been going on and on with this service for so long. What is his secret? I thought that was an interesting example to relay for conveying the point about allowing the leader some space. All right.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing the 5 top ways in which one can show care, to show empathy, to show patience, to have respectful disagreement, and to have responsibility as a follower also, that the way we follow will have its impact on the leader. That's also a kind of devotee care for the leader. And most importantly, allowing some space and some downtime for the leader. I think these are really amazing gems, and many of the leaders across the world of ISKCON are going to benefit, not just now but also in future, from some of these nuggets you just shared with us. So this brings me to another point, that ISKCON has just begun its formal leadership training at certain levels. Now, in your travels, in your experiences, in your interactions with other spiritual organizations across the world, what have been some of the most impressive leadership training and care for leaders, standards of care or systems of care, especially for leaders, which you have seen in different organizations apart from ISKCON, beyond ISKCON, in your experience, which you feel, which we can try to follow or imbibe some salient points?
Let me go back to something I said at the very beginning. Looking hindsight about my university life and understanding something about devotee care, I can certainly understand more. I can see what Yale University and these top Ivy League schools do. Their policy is, once we admit you, and practically most students kill themselves trying to be admitted. Once we admit you, we lavish you because we see your potential. We see that you are a future leader. That's why we admitted you. We want leaders. We want to influence the world. Like my dean told me, You are a Yale man. You will influence the world. We know what we are doing. That's basically what he was telling me. Do you think we're fools? Do you think we've given you all this scholarship money just for you to renounce the material world? You're not. He was confident. You're not going to do that. We've done our job. We have cared for you, and they did. Once you're admitted, it's like you've entered Brahmaloka, and they do a huge job on your ego, by the way. But they also give you any kind of care you need. What do you want? Medical care? We've got the best hospital. You want psychological care? We've got the best psychology department to help you. Uh, you need more money? What is money? We've got loads of it. We've got billions upon billions of dollars in endowment fund. You need more scholarship money? You need more living expenses? Take it, take it. But they always remind you, remember Mother Yale. In other words, when you graduate and make your millions and billions or become president, senator, or whatever, CEO, remember who cared for you, who gave you everything. Remember Mother Yale. So they lavish their students and give you no excuse for not taking advantage of the care. It's material care, but I learned this is how you groom future leaders. You're recognizing their potential and giving them all facility. They knew what they were doing. They understood that 99% of our students, when they graduate, they're going to be the top leaders. This is how we shape the world. So we're going to give them everything. These students will have no excuse not to succeed. Now, of course, it's material life, and I have to give you some statistics just to balance things out because it's not devotee care, it is fruitive worker care. But still, we can learn something. 45% of their student body, they've released the statistics. 45% seek out mental counseling at least once during their 4 years there because the students tortured themselves so much in high school and secondary school to become admitted. And by the time they achieve Brahmaloka, many of them are in bad shape. And therefore, psychological care is necessary. So my point, though, is I just wanted to balance out the so-called material glories, don't mind. So my point is that I can see how they invested in their students. They counseled them at every step. I had academic advisors when in my first year. They know what they're doing. And they only ask, remember, after you're successful, and we know you're going to succeed, after the success and the money comes, remember Mother Yale and contribute, donate to our fund. So yes, that is what I remember the most about other organizations. I hope you don't mind.
Thank you, Maharaj, for sharing those realizations. And, definitely the one takeaway point from that example which you just shared is that we have to recognize the potential. And coming back to Chaitanya Charitamrita, so can you share, because you're a amazing scholar of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leelas, and you present it in so many wonderful ways and analyze some of the lessons so beautifully, that would you like to share some incident which you remember of how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or his associates really showed that kind of a care for seeing the potential of someone and ultimately groom them, and how the world benefited from that?
I was just meditating on this verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita today. It's chapter 10 of the Anjalila text 1. Funny that you asked me to say something from Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm honored. Uh, this is the verse I've been meditating on today. I don't know if it hits spot on with your specific request, but in any case, it is nectarian. Vande Sri Krishna Chaitanyam Bhakta Nugraha Kataram Yena Kenapi Santustam Bhakta Daktena Shraddhaya. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is always pleased to accept anything given with faith and love by his devotees, and is always ready to bestow mercy upon them. That is my focus for today. Always ready to bestow mercy upon them and pleased to accept anything given with faith and love. And that kind of love is not cheap, but Mahaprabhu makes it easy for us to develop that love for Krishna, which would otherwise be impossible. The second thing that comes to my mind is the Panchatattva. The more the Panchatattva dance, the more they make it easier for us to engage in Krishna's service and taste love of Krishna. And the supply is inexhaustible. The more they drink of devotional service, the more the supply increases. So this is my conclusion, that for leaders, we need to understand, our future leaders, our present leaders, that devotional service is a flood. The flood of love of God means the flood of devotional service. So that flood is always going to go on eternally. We shouldn't complain when we're overloaded with service. That means Krishna's favor. We shouldn't complain when, oh, this is too much, this burden, that burden. We simply have to learn how to swim in that flood, not complain about it. I try to think. It's only because of my ineptitude that I'm feeling stresses and strains and, oh, what to do now. If I were only more Krishna conscious, I'd be able to handle all this. So rather than complaining, oh, what are the devotees doing now? This devotee's doing this, that one's misunderstanding that. I beg, Mahaprabhu, teach me how to swim in the flood of devotional service, which is the flood of love of Krishna. That's the benediction I pray for.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for that amazing answer. Definitely, we need to learn to swim, all strokes, whatever way we can, because definitely the deluge and the flood sometimes can be overwhelming. So, Srila Prabhupada was instructed by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to establish Krishna consciousness in the West, and he established in 1966, and till around the 80s, Krishna consciousness was very much flourishing across the world, especially in the West. But then over a period of time, we have seen that especially leaders in the West seem to have more problems maintaining the Krishna conscious enthusiasm and leadership roles. And historically, it looks like outside of India, there were more leadership crises than in India per se. So would it be accurate to say that, maybe one needs to support the leaders taking leadership roles in the West more, and be very conscious about it, and make special strategies to give that protection and care? And just we would like to hear your thoughts on how we have seen some of those crises manifest through the early 80s and mid 80s and going on into the 90s, and how it has impacted the growth of ISKCON, especially in the West. And a lot of it had to do with crises with the leadership. So what would be your take on that, since you currently have become quite well known for reintroducing Krishna consciousness in the amongst the Western population and leading the outreach with strategies.
Well, first of all, our beloved India is changing rapidly. Secondly, yes, still in terms of a sinful atmosphere, the West reigns supreme, without a question, although India is changing so rapidly. Mm, yes, outreach outside of India can be very demanding because you have no semblance of or remnants of a sane, stable culture to depend on. Again, India is changing rapidly, but there's still traces. There's still uh, mm, leftover stability, cultural stability. Although that's eroding, it's still there though. Whereas the Wild West gets wilder every year. So therefore, it's very incumbent, it's very necessary for our outreachers and leaders in the Western world to take shelter of the Dham. That's what I do. And Krishna has blessed me with wonderful associates, and we hear and chant together in the Dham regularly. That's why this COVID-19 situation is a bit a challenge for me and my associates because we won't be able to meet together in the Dham. It seems we don't know when that's going to happen. We're so accustomed to recharging in that way. So yes, we're back to that point, number 5, in terms of 5 areas of caution for leaders. Number 5 was not taking shelter sufficiently of the Dham. Prabhupada himself said that he made these temples in Mayapur and Vrindavan specifically for his Western outreachers to come and wash off. He said that preaching in the West can be contaminating. The atmosphere is polluted. Some residues come upon you, even without your wanting that. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada said the Dhams, his temples in the Dhams are there so that his Western outreachers can go and wash off that contamination that's externally clinging to them and rejuvenate themselves. So yes, that realization has to be there. We're back to the Dham again. Yes, it's a very important factor. And Srila Prabhupada himself recognized the dangers in the Western world, and he gave us the best solution.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing that realization. That's extremely important. So, as we are uh, spending time in ISKCON, and ISKCON is spreading all across the world, and you have seen the growth of ISKCON over the last 55 years. So, if we were to ask you that, what would be the 3 top changes which would be required either in the culture or in the leadership or in the systems within ISKCON, which would facilitate better care for leaders? So what would those 3 top changes be in the current paradigm, as per your opinion, Maharaj?
Every leader should demonstrate how he or she is arranging for peer support. Uh, no excuses that, I'm in Argentina, what can I do? Of course, with the COVID, that's really restricted our travel. But otherwise, in normal times, every leader should be able to demonstrate his or her ability to associate with with peers. And let me add one point, because I hear this a lot, and you've reminded me. Thank you. Associating with devotees is not a material social skill. I often have to point this out because sometimes I hear from devotees in leadership capacities that, well, I'm just not a sociable person. I'm quiet or I'm just withdrawn. That's just the way I am. But I try to point out to myself and anyone who will listen that associating with devotees is a divine empowerment that you have to beg for. Krishna, please give me the ability to associate with devotees. It's also what I call a Vaishnava sport. Look at that devotee. He's a wonderful devotee. How can I get his association? What can I do? So you're always like a sports star, athlete. You're always calculating. Do I make this move? Do I make that move? Of course, you don't tell the devotee, but you're watching for opportunities. What can I do to deepen my relationship with this devotee? And this is a wonderful way to live life. That's why I call it the Vaishnava sport. And you're praying, you're begging Krishna. I don't know how I'm going to pull this one off, how I'm going to be able to taste this devotee's association. Krishna, please help me. I'll be patient. So you're always in that kind of mentality that this sangha with devotees is a divine empowerment. It doesn't depend on my material personality. It doesn't depend on whether I've got the gift of the gab. Sometimes people think Americans can just spontaneously talk about anything, crack a joke within half a second, or just always got something to say. And yeah, to some extent, the culture is like that. Of course, I've been all over the world, so I can't say I'm much of an American. But anyway, you would think that, wow, I can't talk like that. I can't just bubble spontaneously, come up with a joke every 5 seconds. And it's not about that. It's a spiritual empowerment, a Shakti that you beg Krishna for. And Krishna gradually bestows it upon you. And you taste the reservoir of devotee sangha, and you become addicted to it. So that is an important point for me. It's not a mundane social skill. And I hope anyone in a leadership position now and in the future recognizes that we have to learn how to associate with our peers. Whether you think they're a little bit more advanced than you, or much more advanced than you, or a little bit less advanced, or much less advanced, we've got to learn how to associate with them. And it's such a learning experience. Sometimes it's tough on your false ego, I'll be the first to say. But it is so purifying, so enlivening. I thank Krishna that somehow or other I have attained a bit of association from such wonderful devotees.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing your amazing insights on this. And I can see one thing which you're really emphasizing for leaders is the peer association in a very spiritual, transcendental context of practice of the Panchanga Bhakti, the simple, direct process of hearing, chanting, relishing the practice of bhakti in a holy dham and a context where a spiritual environment can be created. And I think the repeated emphasis which you're making is really being noticed. And thank you very much for sharing with your experience from the past. So we are very grateful to His Holiness Devamrita Swami Maharaj on behalf of all of the audience today who are present live and then who will also be hearing the recordings later. We are very grateful, Maharaj, for sharing your decades long journey, your experience, and unpacking all of those complexities in the form of such simple, wonderful, nuggets of wisdom, clearly delineated points, like, just to remind everybody again, the 5 main areas of caution which Maharaj explained for leaders is, first of all, one has to be very spiritually nourished and one should be very cautious about losing the spiritual nourishment. Second, he mentioned about inattentiveness during the practice of the process. Third, he mentioned about not sufficient not sufficiently spending time in the holy dham and getting nourished in the holy dham. Then he spoke about how one as a leader may have tendency to be isolated just because of being extremely busy and absorbed in fulfilling his responsibilities. And fifth caution he has given us is being very cautious about envy creeping into the heart and how we should convert that envy into direct appreciation. And I would like to conclude today's session by also reflecting on the five top ways Maharaj has shared on how one can care for a leader within ISKCON. And the first being that we actually try to become good followers. And secondly, he spoke about expressing disagreements in a respectful way so that the point can be expressed, but at the same time, the relationship can be maintained. Third, he spoke the beautiful example of a leader, how he created downtime for himself by communicating very clearly that he needs his own space. And gradually that communication went across. And we can see that it worked for that person, and he has managed to maintain a very strong, robust, consistent leadership profile for several decades in the service of Srila Prabhupada. So having downtime and allowing space for the leader, and then showing patience, and fifth is showing some empathy. So thank you so much, Maharaj, on behalf of the Global Devotee Care Directorate and also on behalf of the GBC SPT Strategic Planning Team. We would like to express our gratitude to you and to all those who are watching this program live. The details about the next such conversation, which may happen sometime the next week, the exact details of the speaker and the timings and the dates would be communicated on the same Facebook page. So please stay tuned in to continue conversations on devotee care, to create inspiration amongst leaders and influencers amongst ISKCON on how important it is to establish the various levels of devotee care within ISKCON communities, within ISKCON temples. So with those words, thank you all very much. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Gauranga Prabhu. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Maharaj. Hare Krishna.